everybody. Aletha here. What a beautiful, beautiful January it has been. No snow yet. Well, we had one day of snow, right? Beautiful. I want to introduce a classmate of mine. And this year, you guys heard me say it last year that this year I was going to bring on once a month a military member. And I'm starting with my USNA Naval Academy alumni. And what better way to start out would be with the ones that are living close by to me so I can reach out and touch them and say, hey, come visit me. But anyway, I want to introduce this beautiful lady, and she's going to give us a little bit of bio because the entire conversation is going to be about where we were, what did we do, and where we are now, and how we are incorporating mind and body into our daily business and our lives, and how we ourselves as agents of change that we always are and have been help provide notes of hope to you guys who are listening. And I just want to give you a forewarning. You have two military members here that you might hear some curse words. So be an adult and just cock your ears and just let it go, okay? Without further ado, please let me introduce Kristin. Now, Kristin, I say Kristin. I call her everything under the sun. So she's going to tell us what was her name when she was at the Naval Academy and what is her name now, last name now.
I was Kristin Dreyfus of the Academy, and I was actually a 92 grad. I think you might have been a year or two behind me.
Yes, I was 2 years behind you. So you are 1994 minus two. We haven't gotten over that yet.
No, I don't think we ever will.
Now, what company were you in when you were at the academy?
I started out in 33rd Company in 8th Wing. We were up in 8th
Okay.
Corps, and we were shuffled after youngster year, and I ended up in 3rd Company, and we were over on I think 1-3.
Yeah. Did you do any of the cadre kind of leadership in your company?
I was XO of the company one semester senior year, and I might have been a platoon commander or squad leader, one of the other ones, but I
Yeah, I
never.
think that's how I remember meeting you.
Yeah,
Now, what did you study when you were at the academy?
I got my undergrad in chemistry, and I
Oh,
wanted to
wow.
be a doctor. Interestingly enough, I think it was just a kernel in the back of my mind. We'll get to that more later, but
Yeah.
um, at the time they weren't offering very many billets at all, and I was a poor student. I didn't do very well. I graduated, but I wasn't even close to being able to get into uses. So
Hmm.
I took that chemistry degree and I used it to brew beer for the longest time.
Oh, wow. So what's your favorite flavor? Uh,
It's funny because I don't really drink beer much anymore, and I think someday when I get my 100-acre property in Oregon, where I've got all my organic herbs and everything that I'm growing, I will probably get into winemaking. But that's a long
yeah.
way away. Most of my chemistry these days goes into making herbal supplements, tinctures, teas, herbal medicine, a lot of cooking because a lot of cooking is chemistry based, which is really interesting.
Mm.
I'm into, you know, like one of my favorite books is The Food Lab,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
and fermented foods. Yeah.
Oh, you're speaking my language right there, and everything organic, from organic to herbs to tinctures to everything. So I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. Now, when you left the academy, did you what did you go in? Marine Corps? Did you go Navy?
Funny you should ask that. I wanted to go Marine Corps, and I didn't feel like I would be welcome in the Marine Corps.
Mm.
They had just opened up the combat exclusion not long after I graduated, but I didn't feel like I would be welcome enough that that was something I was going to do for a career. So I
Yeah.
ended up going naval aviation, which is interesting because I ended up in an F-14 squadron in the F-14 community, and I'm not sure how welcome I was there either.
Mm.
but um, but I made the best of it. So I ended up being an aviator.
Nice. So what ships were you working on for your aviation career?
So I did most of my deployments on the Theodore Roosevelt, and I spent some other time on the Stennis and the Eisenhower, and then I was a flight instructor at the Fleet Replacement Squadron, VF 101, for 3 years, and I ended up flying on almost every carrier in the Navy inventory eventually,
Mm.
just
Oh,
from doing career calls with students. So I can't even remember the list anymore. I've got all the patches on my jacket.
oh, you're
But
fine. No, no, no. That's incredible. I mean, what were some of the lessons of resiliency that showed up from your career? I mean, talk about going into a field that was male dominant and then going all the way up to finishing your career. How long did you stay in the Navy and all that stuff? Tell us all in a little summary as to how that showed up, how your resiliency showed up as you went through your career.
so I ended up flying from 1992 until 2006, and I did the last deployment with F-14s. We got back from that deployment in February of 2006, and they retired the last F-14 in September, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and that's when I stopped flying. I ended up doing other things, which was actually a blessing in disguise. Um, oh my gosh, we don't. I could talk for a week on all the lessons I learned. I think I survived because I adapted a persona that fit in well, but I ended up getting out of the Navy eventually. Number one, because it was time and I had to retire, but also because I couldn't be the real me and it didn't feel
Mm.
genuine. So I adopted a persona that was pretty tough with a thick skin, and I really learned how to not take things personally, or at least hide it really well,
Yeah.
uh, which is a skill in and of itself. But at the same time, not being a genuine self really eats at your soul a little bit. So
Yeah.
leaving aviation was a really good thing, and I was able to experience a lot more things from the Navy and the military in general that I wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So
Mm.
um, yeah.
Did you feel like after you transitioned from aviation to other things, what did you do after aviation?
I'll tell you, one of the coolest things I did was I ended up in Hawaii. And it was funny
Mm.
because it was a spur of the moment decision. And they need people in Hawaii bad enough that if you even whisper Hawaii, they will send you there. And I regretted it. And the instant I stepped off the airplane, I didn't regret it anymore. And it ended up being 3 of the best years of my life. And that's where I ended up getting into triathlon. Although
Mm.
I had done a triathlon in 1992, I immediately retired and didn't do another triathlon until I think 2006. And then
Mm.
that just spurred an obsession, and I ended up doing triathlon like on almost a semi-professional basis for about the next 7 years. Ended up competing for Navy in both the Olympic distance out in Ventura, California, a number of times, and then the World Championships in Kona, Hawaii, 4 times.
Wow.
And that has been a little bit of a defining thing in my life, and has contributed to helping me get where I am today, because people see that on my resume and they're like, they want to talk about it, they want to ask about what that experience was like. But being in Hawaii opened up all kinds of doors. And this may sound strange, but maybe you've experienced this as well. I ended up finally getting friends that were outside of the Navy,
Yes.
which, in naval aviation, it's this cloistered boys network, and you don't do anything outside the fold. Everything, you go to the O Club on Fridays and you hang out. You When you go out in Liberty, it's always together. So being, set loose in Hawaii gave me the opportunity to explore and do things with people, a really, really diverse group of people. For example, one of my birthdays before I left the island, I was looking at the room. Somebody had thrown a surprise party for me, so they invited all the people. But I was looking around, and I've got Harley bikers, I've got triathletes, I've got Navy folks, I've got local people from the coffee shop. It was just a really interesting mix that I would
Mm.
have never have experienced had I stayed in naval aviation, because I would have stayed in that tiny little bubble and never left. And
Yeah.
you've got to learn how to talk to people outside the Navy. The Navy's not going to hand when you're on your deathbed. So you got to get out there and learn how to talk to people and relate to people that don't have even remotely the same experience as you. And so that was a really good lesson to help get me where I am today, which is a completely different community. I'm in the healthcare field now, but that process started in Hawaii. The other thing I did in Hawaii was I got my master's in nutrition, and that is another thing that really, really sparked my interest or re-sparked my interest in healthcare and kind of, you know, reawakened the idea of perhaps getting into healthcare somehow. That would, of course, take many more years, but Hawaii was really pivotal in changing my life. The last thing that happened in Hawaii that was really important is I ran into my first naturopathic doctor, an acupuncturist, and she treated me for about, I met her about a year in, she treated me for about 2 years, and I never forgot that experience. And I ended up getting acupuncture for, I've been getting acupuncture ever since, essentially since 2007, and it
Mm.
uh, really sparked an interest in Oriental medicine and looking at things differently. It's a completely different paradigm, and so I'm peeling back the layers on the conservative Midwest person that I am and emerging into somebody that has, or at least is open to many, many different experiences, different cultures. I got
Yeah.
so many Hawaii. So leaving naval aviation was so far one of the best things that ever happened to me.
You know, that's a beautiful experience and beautiful story and a transition. But one of the things that we can get from just listening to you is that when one door closes, the one that opens, that though it seems so daunting, is an unknown that we just have to learn to say the unknown is my friend, and I trust that the universe and God has a plan for me. I remember when I had cancer and being a surface warfare, and they weren't releasing anyone from the community. But I'm like, what else am I to do? And I said, well, the door is closing, but you guys are not letting me close the door. They literally had a foot in the door and kept the door ajar, so I couldn't even close the door. So I really, this resiliency that we're talking about, it just shows up. And so I love the fact that when I remember that time when they retired all the F-14. I think I was on the Abraham Lincoln when they did that, maybe, or the Jarrett, the frigate, and that was scary because then what else were you going to do? You would have to completely either retrained with the 18s or just go somewhere else. And I don't think they were giving you guys the opportunity to go back into the aviation loop to retrain for something else, were they?
Uh, for many, for many guys, they were, and
Hmm.
it just depended on. So one of the frustrating things about naval aviation is that I never felt I got a fair shake in terms of getting some of the schools that would have made me promotable.
Yeah.
Um, like the FAC-A school, the Forward Air Controller, and Top Gun. Obviously, there were a couple women that went to Top Gun about when I was flying, but it wasn't me.
Yeah.
In order to have been transitioned to Hornets, I would have had to have gotten those, or been young enough in my career that in order to do a department head tour, I would have had to transition to Hornets. So that a lot of the younger guys just automatically transitioned into Hornet, and they just sent them through the Fleet Replacement Squadron for a couple months. They learned a new
Yeah.
aircraft. I mean, learning how to fly is a much bigger task than switching aircraft. So it really wasn't that big a deal. For the more
Mm.
senior folks, you would have had to been promotable in order to go on and fly the Hornet.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now, you mentioned that after Hawaii, where did you land ended? Where did you land, and is that where you are now?
No, so I ended up, wow, so much life to cover. I was in the Middle East from 2009 to 2010 on a year-long tour working for the Third Army, the JIF the Joint Forces, JIF, oh my God, so many acronyms,
Yeah.
JIF, Joint
Dipmic.
Forces Land. So I was actually a lone Navy officer working among the Army in Kuwait. It was supposed to be a 6-month job, but I signed up for a year in order to guarantee that I wouldn't have to deploy again before I retired, which ended up being a good thing. But at the same time, it was a year with the Army, and I'll be a little bit flippant, like I wanted to shoot myself. It was that kind of thing. Um, I'm I'm kidding. I'm just trying to describe how it was one of the most awful tours I ever
Yeah.
had. But I had a lot of life stuff going on at the same time. We can get into that part later. I had some
Yeah.
personal things going on, but it was a really hard tour. I ended up in Little Creek after that, working for an electronic warfare command. But the cool thing about that Middle East tour was that I didn't have to deploy ever again. And after I
Mm.
left Little Creek, I ended up in Annapolis at the Naval Academy, working in the physical education department, which is like, I remember when I was a junior officer, walking around the yard and we were talking about, who's the XO of the PE department, which is essentially the military commander, because the PE department is run by a civilian. And so the
Mm.
XO is always a military member. But I was in charge of all the military members. But we are talking about, who do you have to sleep with to get that job? So I ended up in that job. It was complete serendipity. Somebody had been
Mm.
offered it and they turned it down. And I'm like, who would turn down this job? So for 3 years, I ended up being a glorified gym teacher. And
Nice.
it was like my dream job. And when I checked in, my boss said, just keep me out of trouble. You can do whatever you want to do. And so I did. I got out of trouble. I did all the work I
Mm.
was supposed to do. I had a great staff, many of whom I still keep in touch with. And I took advantage of being in one of the greatest places that the Navy has.
Yeah.
I didn't live on the yard, but lived close to the yard. But I got to get involved in Navy sailing. So I taught small leadership in the OSTS program. I was involved in the sexual assault education program. I taught ethics for a year, which was actually unbelievably challenging. Like,
Mm.
there's nothing harder than trying to teach ethics. And then I got to teach physical education electives. Like, I taught a nutrition course, I taught the physical conditioning course, the triathlon course. It was so much fun. Oh my gosh. But I
Nice.
knew it was time to leave the Navy when I had my dream. It was my dream job. Like, it's hard to describe how much I loved that job. And I still had some days that I did not want to go to work. I was just getting tired.
Mm.
And so in 2015, I finally retired and I had no plan. And I didn't want to go back into the military government contractor complex. There was something that didn't sit right with it. And
Mm.
I've got other things that I could probably share to describe where my heart and soul was at the time. But I knew I
Yeah.
needed something different. So I ended up sitting around and I was drinking way too much and watching too much Netflix. And I ended up at a conference of some sort in California. And one of the speakers there was going on about proteins and amino acids. And he stopped in mid sentence, is like, yeah, but you guys don't want to be doctors, so I'm going to move on. Like, well, wait a minute. I want to be a doctor. And it hit me just like all the big things in my life that have turned out really well. It hit me like, and that's my dog. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was like, what is that? He's like, I want to be a
she's
doctor
she's
too.
laying flat on her back, throwing her
Yeah.
paw on my
I,
face.
I
God
think
bless
he
her.
said he wanted to be a doctor also, just to agree.
Yeah. So, yeah. Um, Part of me had also wanted to be a vet, but I cannot look at animals suffer. It just tears my heart apart.
Yeah.
So I started doing some Googling and I talked to a friend that I had at the time and was saying, hey, what was the name of that school? It's almost like that conversation they had in Top Gun. Hey, what was the name of that truck driver school? Uh, but So, and she mentioned Bastyr University. So I Googled Bastyr and I had another one of those intuitional, like, it wasn't even a light bulb, it was like a lightning bolt. And I
Mm.
had, before the end of that conference, even before I left San Francisco, I had already signed up for prerequisites. I had already
Nice.
started the process. And at the time, I was only applying for naturopathic physician. I didn't have the courage to do the acupuncture thing. I didn't think it was going to be smart enough. It seemed too complicated. It seemed too much like black magic. So a year later, in 2016, I'm driving west to Seattle, going to be a doctor. I had no clue what I was getting into. None.
Wow. And you are now, what is your title now?
I am ND, as in November Delta, which stands for Naturopathic Doctor. We are recognized in and licensed and regulated in, I think, half the state, about 20 states.
Mm,
And it's one of those things that I like to make a distinction. I'm not a naturopath. There are
mm-hmm.
people that get online degrees and do herbal medicine and they call themselves naturopaths. That's not what I do. I am a naturopathic doctor. I'm licensed, I'm credentialed with insurance. We do primary care, um, prescribe, not that this is what I like to do, but prescribe prescription drugs when it's indicated. So I'm a
Mm-hmm.
doctor. I ended up being a doctor. And halfway through
Yes.
med school, I decided I was going to go ahead and bite the bullet and do what I really wanted to do, which was acupuncture. So I ended up doing two programs at once: the doctoral program for the naturopathic physician, and then the master's in Oriental medicine. And I
Wow.
include Chinese herbal medicine because herbs are my thing.
Yeah, congratulations, ma'am.
Yeah. So in the end, I am now NDLAC licensed acupuncturist with Chinese herbal medicine.
Well, we got a lot to talk about. So, first of all, congratulations on, making it for what, 20 years, right? You made 20, or did you stay longer than
23.
20? So
23.
23 years. So congratulations on your retirement, and then congratulations on your doctorate degrees in your dream job. When we talk about what is your second career after the Navy, do you feel like you're in the job that um, brings out your gift and your passion?
I do. I really do. There were just some days that I love what I do so much. The downside is that I'm way older than my cohort, and I'm playing the residency game. And
Uh huh.
although I the job I got is it's hard to describe. I'm just going to say it's awesome because so many medical doctors, MDs, residencies where they work 60 to 80 hours a week, and that's just not what naturopaths are about, or naturopathic
Hmm.
doctors. So I work 40 hours a week. I do work more than that because I'm doing continuing education. I'm continuing to learn on my own. All the
Yeah.
books that I wanted to read while I was in school, I am now reading. Um, and so
Whoa.
even though I'm only working 40 hours a week, I am still immersed in things much, much more.
Beautiful.
But the upside is that I'm getting a paycheck now, which is really nice.
Yay.
Get to
You,
read the
you
things that I
mentioned something in your recounting of the Naval Academy and in the Navy. You felt like sometimes that you were not being your authentic self, and that you had to develop a persona. And when we talk about it, when and I include myself in this because we've had several conversation about where we are in our spiritual growth, and how we are now realizing just how important that mind body spirit connection is, so important. um so I want you to see if you can touch a little bit more on that, on the fact that in the military, we kind of have this persona of military. We just go to work, and that's it. But in a way, it kind of makes us shut ourselves off from our emotions. And that emotional shutdown, when we get home, if we have a family, now you go right into that and you have another persona. And so there's sometimes you're just not yourself. And what I want you to talk about is the importance of having that period where you can be yourself and have that mind body connection to your own soul. I
Wow, that's deep.
know.
That's deep.
Let's
So
go.
part of part of my journey was coming out of the closet, and I was so in the closet that I didn't even know I was in the closet. And that's part of the reason why my tour in the Middle East was difficult, because I was in the process of coming out of the closet and going through yet another divorce. I feel a little bit like a cliche,
Yeah.
but once you realize, once you pull the veil away, you realize just how not genuine you've been. It's it's almost impossible not to take the path forward to be genuine. And the
Mm.
cool thing is that when you start being genuine for yourself and showing up for other people in a genuine way, they respond to you in a way that is, I don't know, it just brings a lot of joy in the way that people have responded and accepted and appreciated and respected once I actually started showing up as the real me. And that was actually a
Mm.
process because if I came out of the closet in 2009 or 2010, Don't Ask, Don't Tell wasn't actually even repealed until 2012.
Right.
And that was one of the other things that I got to do with my last tour at the Naval Academy was work with the LGBT midshipman group and be a mentor there, and then work with the USNA Out alumni group and work with them. But we have to put on so many faces. You know, when
Yeah.
we go into work, we have to put on a face. It's just part of surviving, right? We when we see our family and they don't want to hear our stuff, we put on a face. And
Yeah.
but there's got to be a time in your day in your week that you look in the mirror and you don't have to wear any of those masks and you can just be you. And the reason that's important is so you can just accept it.
Yeah.
Because without self acceptance or being gentle with yourself or being forgiving for yourself, just nothing works. Because oh my gosh,
Yeah.
so much anxiety and self judgment. It just leads to a life that has no joy. And like we're not
Yeah.
here to do that. We're here to appreciate and make connections and be with people who respect us. And that can't you can't do that unless you actually can show up and acknowledge who you are and be good with it.
What made you decide to start showing up as you?
I think I have a drive to be as honest as possible. Although I do have a passive aggressive bent. Don't get me wrong. Um, I, it's almost like a feedback loop. So you show
Mm.
up as yourself a little bit, and people respond well, and then you're like,
Mm.
oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And then you show up as yourself again, and you show up as yourself again. And it's like going to the
Mm.
gym where you work out a muscle, and then the biceps get bigger, and they get bigger,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, I like what I see in the mirror. And it's the same thing with yourself. You show yourself, and people are okay with it, and you're okay with it, and you build that
Yeah.
muscle of self acceptance, and then you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, that looks pretty good. I like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, as a life coach, I really encourage my clients to first identify who they are. I mean, if you want to make changes, you got to know who you truly are and how you want to show up in the world.
That's the
And
biggest.
yes, and then so it's so empowering when we get them to tell the truth, to actually tell the truth about who they are. And it's, sometimes it's not easy because there's some people that are living in an abusive situation where they, if they tell the truth then and somebody hears about it, then they go back to the abusive situation and they don't know how to, they haven't built an escape plan to get out of it. So we're not, it's not as easy as it sounds for some people. So but for those people that are listening to this, I just wanted to point out that it's so important that you yourself tell yourself the truth of who you truly are. And maybe in your closet, just show up as yourself, with nobody else watching, show up as yourself every morning in front of that mirror.
I think one of the
Um,
challenges figuring that out, and I think one of the challenges being a young person is being patient with the process because you're not going to figure this out right away.
oh,
And
yeah,
not only that, but you're going to change as you get older. So you've got to you've got to be patient with the process of figuring out who you are, and also be patient with the process of realizing that you've changed and going with the
yeah.
change and going with the flow.
So one of the key elements for change in a big jump that you made coming out of the closet and showing up as you are and letting the world know who you are is the support part. And so, how was the support for you in that field? Research shows social support is so vital to our wellness. So, again, were you being that resilient person, just diving through on your own, or did you have a good support
I had a good
team?
support network. My brother came out a year before me, and that made it
Mm.
so much easier with my family. because then it didn't have to be awkward. I mean, you know, I think our family knows more about us than we know about ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
And with my
Amen.
friends, I was definitely hesitant. You know, I lost a friend or two over it. But I mean, that's bound to happen. But for the most part, people were like, "Well, yeah, so what?" And
Yeah.
I think I had been in the military community, and I had a really, really conservative Midwest background. That you're so used to hearing how horrible these things are that you just expect that's how people will respond, and that's not how people will respond. And if you
Mm.
surround yourself with really good people, which I had been lucky enough to fall into, that I was surrounded by really good people, that just didn't, the negative side of it did come to fruition. So I had a really great support network. But
Mm.
it's a it's a process of coming out in and of itself is a really challenging thing, because it's not like you do it once, you do it over and over and over.
Yes.
Maybe you get a little better at it through time, but at the same time, it was almost exhausting, because you know, every time you see a person that you hadn't seen for a while, you have to explain this thing
Yeah.
if it, you know, ends up being pertinent. um, but it's been 10 years now, or 11 years, and yeah,
Hmm.
so I ended up having no issues.
Yeah. You're talking about, and you've mentioned this twice about just showing up and showing and doing it again and developing that brain memory. You know what she's talking about is the fact that habits are created from thoughts and emotions. So mostly thoughts, and it's sometimes they become so hardwired into your body, into your system, that they are just lying in your subconscious. They become automatic. So when you have this new thought and this new development that you want to change your way, you want to, show up as yourself all the time, that new that's a new habit that you have to develop. And nothing is defined as a habit until you've done it more than once. And what they are recommending in neuroplasticity is to do it up to 21 days, every day for 21 days. And then the rewiring is showing up, right? So you're
You
building
know,
that muscle.
I think one of the things that also helped was that I finally caved and got a therapist, and
Yay.
I did some therapy. And there are some goods and others to talk therapy. I'm not a huge fan, but it definitely served its purpose. But the reason it did serve its purpose is because I had a coach there who could,
Mm,
we talked about that stuff, where, you know, rewiring the brain, and being patient with the process, and
yeah.
developing new habits. But I didn't do that on my own.
Mm,
I needed somebody to show me the ropes a little bit psychologically, and kind of walk me through the process. And that I can't undervalue that part of the team that kind of
yeah.
got me to where I am today.
I have learned to just love the fact that it's okay to ask for professional help when
Hmm.
when your mental clarity is just not processing what you need to process. So you talked about a couple of things there, Kerr. You talked about a dark night in the soul, and you didn't really kind of say dark night of the soul. How many times have you gone through your dark nights of the soul? And tell your audience what the heck is the dark night of the soul in the first place.
The dark night of the soul for me is just rock bottom.
Oh yeah,
It's just a rock bottom where you're just like, what the ever living fuck is going on, and am I ever
yeah.
going to get through this? So, my dark night of the soul
Oh, we're
came
supposed to bleep.
when I had I was I so essentially what happened was I fell in love with a woman, and it was something that was so beyond my paradigm that it shook my absolute foundation to the core. And I had so much judgment that came from it, you know, judgment from society, judgment that I thought would be from society, judgment for myself. And then I made some really poor life decisions in terms of relationships that made it even worse. So I was on my own worst enemy in so many ways. Um,
Yeah.
and it was just and I've gone through a lot of depression and anxiety. And the funny thing is, I was in the military, before I entered the medical field, I didn't know that that's what these things were called. I just thought I
Yeah.
was uptight, or
Yeah.
I was having
Yeah.
right? So yeah, depression and anxiety are real things. Like there are
Yeah.
neurotransmitters that are all associated with that shit. So,
Right. Oh,
um,
bleep.
plus, plus I was sleep deprived. So oh my god, so many things. So
Yeah.
it was a place where I absolutely hit rock bottom. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't think I was ever going to get out of it. And eventually, you are it's like you can't hide it anymore.
Yeah.
That's the dark night of the soul, where you can't hide it anymore, and it's right here, like
Yeah.
right here, and you suddenly or finally have to face it, and it's just like all the ugly truths I think about myself. I now have to come to terms with all the crap that happened to me when I was a kid. I have to come to terms with all the bad decisions I've ever made, all the bad
Mm.
relationships, all the bad choices. But at the same time, you get to come to terms with all the good things too. And
Mm.
that's where you finally emerge on the other side, when you finally come to terms with the good things as well.
Yeah.
So you accept the things you don't like, you accept that maybe they're not bad, they're just things,
Yeah.
and you embrace the good things, you embrace the joy that there is in life,
Yeah.
and you reestablish your relationship with the world at large in a way that shows that you honor it and
Mm.
be and without apologies.
Love it. Yeah. When I take my clients through their dark nights, it's a journey where I show them that there is an intuition, a soul inside of you that's guiding you. And most people will always, with everybody that I've really spoken to about their dark nights, they began coming out of it because an inner voice took over and started leading them towards the light. And for some of us who don't have never been through it, that is your soul, and your soul knows how to guide you. It's like, I'm reading this book on psycho-cybernetics, and it talks about the cybernetic part of the brain, and the fact that we have a mechanicism inside of us that knows what to do if we just tap into it. And that's beautiful. But one of the things that came out that I'm hearing you say out of this process is you had to list the things that you didn't like and list the things that you did like, and made a choice to adapt or keep the things that you wanted, that you liked and wanted to move forward with as with that person.
Well, I think it's more about honoring those things,
Ah.
because it's not. I don't know if it was a choice as much as I'm going to honor and respect that there are things that I judge as negative and things that I judge as positive.
Mm.
But it's embracing all of it as, I mean, we are light and dark, we are yin and yang,
Yeah. Yeah.
we are the good and the bad, and it's part of being human, because we are animal, but we are spirit, and
Yeah.
it's one of the tougher things for people to come to terms with, is the fact that we are spirit and yet we are still very much animal, with all the things that come with being this earthbound. And I'm sorry,
Mm.
my screen keeps wiggling. Being
Such a
this
dog
earthbound,
shifted again.
right? like like I don't know how many people actually really appreciate getting up and going to the bathroom in the morning, but if there were one thing that I could get rid of, it would be that, because it just makes me feel too base. But that's
Uh,
part of the experience. We're souls
yeah.
in these meat sacks. That's just
Yeah.
part of the experience. Once
I
you okay with that, you're okay with the other thing. And we haven't even talked about sexuality yet, like
mm-mm.
not first and foremost, but I think the shame that is associated with sexuality in our culture is really, it really prevents us from embracing a lot of the joy that we can have as human beings.
Yeah.
So that's part of the process as well.
That's a completely different subject that we're going to have to talk about. We need more than 20 minutes for that. And I think I mean, that is a great. I'm writing it down. Sexuality. I want to stop at the word sex. I'm only kidding. Sexuality. I think that is a subject that I think we should have a forum, just have a group of us talk about it because it does show up. And then we have to talk about that, the divine masculine, divine feminine that's in all of us, and how we are accepting which persona, which is authentic, but it's an authentic persona that's showing up in our day. Sometimes I might wake up with the divine masculine, want to kick ass, and then the next one day, the feminine just wants to be nurturing and loving. And just don't
But
wake
we
me up at 4 a.m. in the morning, okay? You
we
know
should
who's
be able
going to show
to
up.
do those things. We should be allowed to embrace that without being judged for it, you know?
That's the thing.
I think it's one of the neat things that one of the many neat things that I've experienced as being a practitioner is, especially in Seattle where there's so much diversity, is meeting men that are not the military stereotype. And
Mm,
it took me a while to get used to actually meeting men that are a little bit more feminine or okay with their feminine side. And I've now become more accustomed to it. But at first, it was really hard and it was really judgmental. Like, you call yourself a man? Oh my god! So, um, but I'm so grateful that I've had my eyes open to that part of the human experience. That just like it's okay for me to be a little bit more masculine, and I definitely am.
yeah.
It's okay
Yeah,
for a man out there to be a little bit more feminine. And why shouldn't men be feminine? Because being feminine is being nurturing, and
exactly.
be nurturing, and they can be
Yeah.
kind. I don't know why we associate kindness with being feminine. Like, men should be
Exactly.
kind too, right?
You're talking about several things that the only way that we're going to create change is if we create a culture in a community. It starts small because the leadership is not giving it to us. The example of how we're supposed to go about judging or not judging. I think what's going to happen is we're going to have conversations like this, and then we're going to have groups, and then those groups starts having a culture or a community that start to acting, and that's the big part. You can say something, but if you're not acting on it, it's not going to develop into a habit or a behavior down the
Mm-hmm.
line. And so that is, this change. There's a lot of people that are out there for social justice and talking about all that stuff too, but we have to all start acting on it, and it starts with us. So let's heal ourselves first, and going inward and finding out what it is about us that we need to correct or not correct. So before we go on to the last phase, I want to ask you a question. How do you do self-care? What do you do for self-care?
Oh, um,
Yeah.
so that's really hard because I used to do self care when I was in the Navy, and I was judged as lazy
Hmm.
for it, and which is really frustrating because we glorify sleep deprivation in the military and corporate America. Like, if you're not working 24/7, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Which I'm reminded by
He's
my
agreeing.
dog.
I think he's agreeing. He's like,
Yeah,
bullshit.
I'm reminded by my dog here that sleeping, there's nothing better than a good night's rest. The thing is, we're programmed to sleep 8 to 9 hours a day, and longer in the winter, shorter in the summer. That's just the nature of things.
Mm,
So why are we glorifying less? There's just so
yeah.
many bad things about not sleeping. It induces diseases that would not have ever been there otherwise. So you asked me about self-care, and it's definitely sleep. And it's the one
Nice.
thing, sleep and exercise are the two things that I've done my entire life that I've done for self-care. And exercise has been to discharge excess energy. From a Chinese medicine standpoint, that would be discharging that liver qi stagnation. Um,
Mm,
but basically discharging that stress and that anxiety, I, and the endorphins that come from working out are so good for your mental health.
mm,
Um, but sleep and repair, and people tell me I look much younger than I am. And I think it's sleep. And if
mm.
you look at aviators compared to surface warfare officers, aviators always look.
They're always
And
smiling too.
the reason is because we're allowed to sleep. And even if it's 6 hours, that's still more than some surface warfare officer is getting, which is
Yeah.
6 hours in 3 days. That's not healthy. And how does that create a culture where your warfighters are at their absolute peak of performance.
Exactly. And
You know,
lately, since 20, I think about 2020 or 2018, 19 kind of time frame, the Navy and also the rest of the military is trying to focus on that mind body piece, and trying to have their military members focus on finding those pieces and moments where they're doing the self care, and they're taking care of themselves and still showing up to do the top notch job that they're required to do. So it's coming. It's coming. How about intuition? How does your intuition show up? And what does it look like for you?
so that's a funny question. I
Mm.
started working with a Reiki healer 20 over well over 20 years ago, and one of the first things that she said to me when I was in my late 20s was, "You need to use your intuition more." And I looked at her like a deer in the headlights, like, "What? I don't even know what that means." Um, and I've always kept that in the back of my mind. And I think when I talked
Mhm.
about showing up as genuine, that's an important piece of it, because we do
Mhm.
not acknowledge intuition in our culture. You know, we're allowed to say, "Oh, I have a gut feeling," but you're not allowed to base anything on a gut feeling. You need to have
Mhm.
some, research or some data to
Yeah.
support. You're not allowed to use the gut feeling. But there is almost nothing more important in what I do than using intuition. And interestingly, the more you know, the more research I have, the more articles I read, the more books I read, the more people I talk to, the more information I assimilate, the
Hmm.
better my intuition becomes, because it becomes information that is sitting in there somewhere that somehow I am able to access when I need it.
Yeah.
And the more information I have, the more, the more cards that my spirit or my mind has to go through for answers um, when I'm trying to solve problems. And so for me, my intuition shows up, and it helps if I can touch the patient, because when I have a
Hmm.
physical contact, it helps me ground. I could probably do it without touching the patient, but I'm so scattered
Hmm.
that it's hard for me to focus and be mindful and be present unless I'm actually touching the patient. And it's almost like it
Nice.
creates a condition where I have to respect their space. If I'm going to actually touch a stranger, I need to be present for them and be respectful. So it actually creates a condition where I can actually intuit and be receptive to what's coming in. And
Yeah.
I get pictures and colors. I don't get sounds, or for me personally, sometimes I get voices, but I'm actually working with somebody. I won't get that. I'll just get
Mm.
pictures. And so it becomes a conversation with the patient once they're open to me doing the intuitive thing. Hey, I'm seeing this thing. What does it mean to you? And it'll create a conversation. And the cool thing is that when my mentor is in the room with us, see, we might have three people, my mentor, me, and my patient.
Hmm.
Between the three of us, we'll usually get some pretty good information rolling, and the result is many times a psychologically and spiritually significant moment for the patient, where they can really tune into something that's been bothering them, or
Yeah.
a problem they're trying to solve with new perspective and fresh eyes, so they can get some clarity on something that's really, really weighing on them. So,
Absolutely beautiful. I
yeah.
love both my acupuncturist and my osteopath, because they literally, you can tell that they are tapped into their intuition. They are very book smart, but at the same time they feel, just like you mentioned, my acupuncturist will touch and feel a certain area, and that's not right energetically wise, and he will put a needle there or change his mind, even though the book says the headache is for migraine, this is the meridian, you're going to go down the heart meridian or something, and he feels something else. And it's just incredible to watch how he did it. And then my osteopath, I've been having a lot of issues since my surgery, and I went to see her last week to tell her that I can't move my pelvic, and she's listening. But one of the things about you guys is, with your intuition, is that intensive gift of active listening. And
That you can't do it without it. And
yeah,
or even more fundamental than that is just presence.
presence.
I
Yes.
Ridding your mind of, like, okay, I'm hungry and I have to pee,
Yeah.
or I've got to pay, and actually actually showing up for somebody and being in the
Mm.
moment, because that's really the only way it can happen. Yeah, I'm not open enough unless I'm actually focused that directly. I know some people are so gifted they just get stuff all the time. No, I I've really got to focus and be present and mindful for
And
that to
so
happen.
you know how to get there. And what are some other things that you have to do besides being present and touch? And I mean, of course, with being a doctor in any practice, we ask the patient's permission. So she's not just saying that just to she's going to touch a patient. She's asking the patient's permission to touch. But besides touching and being present, what are some of the other ways that you tap into, you get into to that mind space to get into your intuition?
I think it involves a lot of self care. So if I
Mm,
am hungry and I do have to pee going into an appointment, that's just not the space to be
love
in.
it. Love
I've
it.
got to I've got to turn off electronics. I've got to take off my watch. I even take off my Aura ring, because
Mm,
it's distracting, and it's distracting in a sensory way. So I try to remove, and I think I'm going to get better eventually, so I don't have to do these things. But for me right now, that's what it takes to get into that space.
mm-hmm.
Um, so taking care of myself so that when I go into the room, I don't have anything that's hanging over my head that, in a sensory way, is taking away from my ability to sense the patient.
Absolutely. Absolutely love it. I have one more question before we talk about some recommendations for our audience about certain things. Oops, excuse me. I just burped. I I had a beautiful I made ratatouille today and my 18-year-old says, "What? Is it like rats?" No, it's so I had to explain. He's like, "You mean like the movie Ratatouille? They didn't cook in the movie." I said,
Oh my
so,
gosh.
so I had a really spiced ratatouille, but it was so delicious. Talk about talk about adding seasoning. You know, when you talk about flavoring in your herbs, I just
There's nothing that brings me joy more than cooking a good meal.
what's one of your favorite meals you cook?
Oh, see, that's not fair. Um, I think one of my favorite things to make is actually bone stock and vegetable stock, because I don't just it's a process for me. It's therapeutic. It's like some people paint paintings, and I make stock, and I
Oh
cook
wow.
the herbs, and pick the bones. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
I can't make bone stock because I'm a vegetarian. I can't take the smell, so I have a friend actually make it for me. And when I was recovering, they bought a whole big, gigantic gallon of bone stock for me, and I just froze it in bags and just used it. Oh, so nutritious for you. Tell us about
I
the
don't even.
nutritious value of that. You probably know
Why
more
didn't I
than I
even think
do.
of that for you? I should have, because my freezer is full of great stock.
I can still take some more.
I should deliver some. Yes.
Well, let me just ask this one question, and I'm
Sure.
gonna and then we're gonna shift to the last part of this. What has the constraints caused by COVID taught you?
Wash my hands.
True.
How many times were
True.
you on a ship where you would go all day and never wash your hands? And how many surfaces and greasy things did you touch? I look back on that and it just turns my stomach. Oh my God. Oh my God. But I
I
guess
know.
in retrospect, maybe it supported I have a really healthy immune system. And I think part of
Mhm.
it was just because ships are so dirty. Um, I have actually enjoyed the COVID constraints
Yeah.
because it has taken the pressure off of doing things that I wasn't necessarily comfortable doing anyway. I'm a severe introvert.
Mm,
So, it has enabled me to say no to things that I would have normally said yes to because I felt socially pressured to do.
mm.
It has made me value the time I do get with people so much more because it's so much more special.
Yeah.
It has given me much more time with my dog,
Yeah.
which I love people, but she's my girl, and medical school was so challenging that doing at least the classwork part, we were in person for our clinic no matter what, but doing at least the classwork part in on Zoom at home was a gift. Oh my gosh, I got so much more
Mm.
time outside. Instead of sitting in a chair behind a desk or whatever, I'd have my
Mm-hmm.
earbuds in. I'd be listening to class while walking in the forest with my dog. And
Ah,
if you're going to go into a field like the naturopathic medicine, where we say, "Oh, you need to get out and walk more," then
yeah.
maybe I get out and walk more.
It's quite synchronous you mentioning that because today's card of the day that I pull, and I do tarot readings. And for those of you who don't haven't seen me on Facebook, I do these live tarot readings, but I connect using all four of my intuition gifts. And one of the card today was nature, using nature for healing. And in using nature, it talks about literally being present. And how do you become present? Well, there's many ways to become present, starting with the breath, but literally connecting the organs, like connecting to the insides of your body, the organs, the cell, and connecting those to the energy that's nature is presenting to you is just beautiful and healing. When the sun is out, you will not see me studying inside. I'm outside, literally on the grass, suntanning and studying at the same time. Something
That's
about the
why we live in
ground.
Seattle. I did not appreciate sunshine as much. I mean, I loved being in Hawaii and I loved the sunshine, but I did not appreciate it the way I do now.
Did you
Oh my
see the
God.
sun today? It came
Yes.
out.
What is that? What's that thing up there?
Oh,
Full ball of the
I didn't
sky.
go outside because I had a my recovery was rest day today, so I kept on looking outside. I was like, oh my gosh, Ellie, we should go. And but I had to behave. When you talk about self care, I had to be a little bit disciplined with my self care today. But there's a couple of things I would like to ask you. We talk about you about to have organic land. You want to move eventually and have your farm. Sustainability. I actually started a project when I retired and bought an acre land and just grew everything that I needed except for the dairy and stuff on it. So let's talk about sustainability and what do you think about that and what are your dreams towards creating your own sustainable environment?
I just like being super independent, number one.
Yeah.
I think I've been an adult since I was 8 years old, so it's kind of programmed into me to be independent. And
Mm.
I don't like not knowing. Okay, so it's twofold. I don't like knowing how badly animals are treated, and I don't like not knowing what's done to them. And
Mm.
if you're going to eat animals, I think it is our responsibility ethically and morally to do it in a way that is respectful and humane. It's part of the reconciliation of understanding and accepting that I'm human, and
Mm-hmm.
I was designed to eat animal products and still being ethically genuine and honor the existence of honor their existence, because I think in some way they are sentient.
Mm-hmm.
And so a way to do that is to do it myself, and it's a way to be connected. I have raised chickens, and if you
Mm.
ever had to harvest a chicken yourself, it was
Yes.
definitely appreciation for the sanctity of life and how connected you become to those animals. And if you're not
Yeah.
connected, just what a shame it is. You know,
Yeah.
maybe you shouldn't name them because naming them is really, really tough. Um, but at the same time, when you name them, you respect them as the individual that you
Yeah.
are. And I'm not there yet. I do pay a lot of money to buy pork shares and beef shares from some of the local farmers here, so I
Mhm.
know how those animals are treated. And in that way, I'm still a little bit removed, but I am supporting people that have the same values that I do.
Nice. Well,
So that's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
one of the things I wanted to say is I wanted to thank you because for those of you who didn't know, I did a hip replacement, total hip replacement 5 weeks ago, and I strongly this time this was my second replacement, so the other one was done 6 months ago. I strongly did not want to go on the pills, stay on the pills, the strong. I'm not even going to name what they put me on, but it just made me loopy. I didn't want to be on it, so I called her and I said, "Hey, yeah, I don't want to take this anymore. What do you recommend? And she gave me some wonderful recommendation as to what to take. And I actually bought everything you recommended. I bought, and I remember I told you about the citrus one. I'm not having a good time with that. So obviously my body's not.
Your poor liver.
Yeah. So let's talk about some recommendation about some common things that are showing up, and especially during COVID time with the intense stress, the intense fear, anxiety. Let's talk about some recommendations that you would recommend for like insomnia.
So, sleep is a multifaceted thing.
Yeah.
You need to have the nutrients it takes to make the neurotransmitters that help you fall asleep and stay asleep. And you also need to have the nervous system tone, i.e., parasympathetic, the rest and
Hmm.
digest, to turn on so that you can actually get restful sleep. Because if you're in fight or flight, you're not going to get restful sleep. If you
Hmm.
don't have enough magnesium, if you don't have the taurine, if you don't have the melatonin production that you need, all these things contribute. So, uh, diets, dietary, what am I trying to say? Having a healthy whole foods based diet that works for your constitution is really important. And I can't stress
Yeah.
vegetables enough, even though I know that I don't eat enough vegetables. The first nutrient that comes to mind specifically is magnesium.
Yeah.
Because we don't eat enough leafy greens, and because the leafy greens that we do eat aren't the same as they used to be, i.e., we've depleted our soils, we're not getting enough magnesium. Oh, by the
Hmm.
way, we have such stressful lives that we eat up all the magnesium that we have, and we use it so that it's not there to calm us down in the evening.
Hmm.
If you look at the balance of calcium and magnesium, calcium is the excitatory ion and magnesium is the calming ion. We got lots of calcium,
Mm.
do enough magnesium. And specifically for sleep, I like magnesium glycinate. There's so many different forms, as
Mm.
far as magnesium that works for migraines, a magnesium that works for muscle aches, but for sleep, magnesium glycinate, because the glycine is important for the neurotransmitter formation we need to sleep. Second, we need to get out of fight or flight. We need to
Yeah.
be able to relax at night. We need to get away from the blue light.
Hmm.
If the second I get off this call with you, I'm going to put my blue light blockers on. I'm going to turn all
Yeah.
my lights off, start getting into. I'm a set condition zebra throughout the
Yeah.
shift, right? And turn on all the red lights,
Yes. Yes.
and set the conditions for sleep. I don't have devices in my room.
Yeah.
I don't go to bed late. I go to bed relatively early, like 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And from a Chinese medicine standpoint, that's equally important because the time between, this might be a little bit of a deep explanation, but the time between 11 and 1 is called the gallbladder time.
Hmm.
And it's the baby yang. The liver time is the big yang. But if you get to sleep before 11, that baby yang, the gallbladder time between 11 and 1, the gallbladder has the opportunity, and it's not the literal gallbladder, of course, it's the metaphorical meridian gallbladder. It has a
Hmm.
time to replenish the yang that you need to be wide awake when the day comes. Interestingly, if you look at Western medicine, your deepest sleep comes between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. And I'm not sure why that is, but in terms of the different cycles of sleep, your deepest sleep will be
Mm.
between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. And after that, you just cycle, in and out of REM and deep and out of deep,
Mhm.
but you won't get that big period. And the reason why that's important is because that's when your brain kicks out all the accumulated junk and prevents Alzheimer's and dementia. So
Mm.
getting to bed before 11 is super important. Getting rid of electronic devices, ensuring you have a safe space, ensuring the
Mhm.
atmosphere is cool and dark and not disrupted by animals that are sticking paws in your face. So many things go into really good sleep.
Yeah.
When I have patients that come in with insomnia, we work on one thing at a time. What is
Yes.
one thing we can change right now, and then we'll work on the others later. So I might start with a magnesium supplement. I might start with just mindfulness or autogenics or biofeedback,
Yeah.
or I might just start with a little bit of acupuncture to retonify the parasympathetic system. But trying to do too many
Yeah.
things at once doesn't really serve the purpose. Um, Sleep is one of those things that you have to give yourself permission for
Yeah.
first and foremost, because none of the other things are going to work if you don't give yourself permission to sleep.
Nice. What about a tea that you would recommend? I like doing the mint at night, but that's probably the wrong one.
I don't know. From a Chinese medicine standpoint, mint is very cooling, and
Yeah.
so many people in our culture have all this excess heat from being anxious, heat from
Mm,
doing too much, heat from spicy foods. So a nice cooling mint tea might actually constitutionally be very good for you.
mm-hmm.
I like. I don't like the taste of it, but I do like chamomile. I
Mm.
do some Chinese herbs. I won't share that with you because I don't want people just to go out and run it and get Chinese
Yes.
herbs without consulting. Um, Chamomile is super safe. Lemon balm. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what a great herb. So lavender.
Yes.
Um, oh my gosh, there's
I
one
put
more.
some in my ratatouille today. Lavender. I I love using lavender in my cooking. Absolutely. How about going down the same line with anxiety? I mean, anxiety, oh my goodness. Well, for one, I know from my standpoint, I use breath training for them, for my clients. But what would you recommend for anxiety?
I would almost recommend finding a practitioner because it's
Mm-hmm.
such a complicated thing. Is your anxiety because your neurotransmitters are off? Or do you have genetic mutations where you don't process B vitamins properly or you don't absorb B vitamins properly? Is your diet poor so that you're not getting B vitamins? Um, are you exercising too much? Are you working too hard? Have you had trauma? Have
Yeah.
you been sexually assaulted? Have you been abused in some way? Are you in an abusive relationship now? Oh my gosh, so
So
many
patient
things.
history is so important. So that's a great recommendation. Go
Yeah.
see a practitioner before you even apply any of the recommendations for sure.
And it may take more than one practitioner, and it may take you shopping around like a good hairstylist to find
Yeah.
the right you. I don't think the answer is to throw a lot of supplements at it because so many people are like, oh yeah, St. John's wort. Oh yeah, just drink lavender tea. No, people who have serious anxiety to the
Mm-hmm.
point where their GAD-7s are elevated, they have, or their
Mm.
PHQ-9, if they're depressed. If the PHQ-9 comes back elevated, then it's a multifaceted problem, and having more than one modality on board is going to be super helpful. Having breath work, having a therapist, having an
Yeah.
acupuncturist. And I understand all these things take money.
Yeah.
I get, but there are ways, and there are definitely practitioners like my office. We're in one of the most expensive cities in the country, and yet our Medicaid price for a 30 minutes of acupuncture is just jaw-droppingly affordable. So
Mm-hmm.
you just got to find them in your area, look around, ask your local networks for recommendations on who does. Like I do treatment traits with people, and so there are ways to get the things you need. And I think that goes back to living your soul path and manifestation, which I know you're big into as well.
Oh, yes.
It's almost like if you build it, they will come. If
Yeah.
you need it from the universe and acknowledge it, that you will find a way to get what you need.
Well, listen, we're not going to go into too much details about anything else because I think I would love to have you come on, like at the end of one of my sessions or something, or come on maybe for 15 minutes to talk about the neck or talk about the back. I would love for you to be my nutrition or my acupuncture and all that in a Kit Kat consultant when it comes to recommendation for my audience out there. Like I said, we are here to provide notes of hope to you. Make sure you consult with a professional doctor or practitioner before you take any recommendation that's showing up on my podcast. But at the same time, we are providing you with some notes of hope that some things that you might possibly didn't know about, and you can go ask your practitioner about and see if that would work for you. Um, we are coming to the end of our interview, but I want to say, what would you like to say to the audience out there, if anything, about how to really stay connected to your authentic self?
I keep being called to share a book I read by Tara Brach.
Mm,
Are you familiar with her?
no.
Radical Acceptance. It's one of the best books I ever read, and I read it back in 2010, I think. And I think
Oh,
the
I
key
do have
to,
it.
are you kidding me? Do you really?
No, it's a radical awakening.
Okay.
That's a
Well,
little bit
I'll bet
different.
step. But I think the key to showing up as genuine and being genuine and enjoying the ride and finding joy in this weird thing we call life is just accepting who we are. Looking at the dark parts and saying, "Yep, okay, I got that." But at the same time, honoring the fact that you've got some good parts too, and that none
Mhm.
of us are perfect, and that we're all in this together, and we're all in this together, pretty much.
That is so true. Well, thank you so much. This has been beautiful. I'm coming after you guys, alumni. So make sure you don't try to hide from me because when I reach out to you, I want to talk to you.